let's make a fall jacket. For my jacket, I did start off with a mock-up as I did not have a pattern. I decided to drape it on my dress form to get a feeling of what the front and back would be, so I kind of did this like half mock-up, where the back I'm actually going to be mirroring this so that this would be like one complete piece, and then the front it's going to be two separate pieces, and then there will be buttons kind of all the way down the front that will be combining it. I also worked on the sleeve some so that I would have the shape that I was looking for. I wanted it to be a little longer and almost flared towards the ends. Once I did that, I did sew it up to see how it fit and what did it look like. With the sleeves, I noticed it was way too big at the bottom for what I was looking for, so I am going to adjust that. I also want to make the front a little bit bigger so I have room for the buttons, but the back and the length of it seems pretty good. I may lower it slightly as I do like my jackets a little bit on the longer side. So now that I have this done, I can kind of take these apart, these pieces, since I just did a basting stitch, and I can actually cut out my material. I'm going to be using this tan material that I got from Joann Fabrics. The cat was helping, and basically I just cut out the pieces based off of those mock-ups. It became very challenging because of the cat, but I was able to get it done. So this is what it looks like. I did pin the shoulder seams for the front to the back so that I could get a general image. It looks like it's all kind of fitting pretty well. I'm going to probably cut a little bit off of the top of the shoulder, make this more diagonal, as I didn't realize that when I did the mock-up, I guess because the fabrics were different, it wasn't laying the same. Once I had that done, I did like how the shoulder seams were looking, so now it is time to do the side seams and then sew those up. So all I did was pin up those side seams for both sides of the jacket. This also started to flare out much more than I thought it would. I think I may have cut it a little bit too much of like a seam allowance, so I just cut some of that off and then took the seam. I then repeated that exact same process all for the second side, as I had something that worked and that I liked how it looked. I also went ahead and with right sides together sewed up the sleeves so that I could have that one seam done for both sleeves. So with the base of the jacket done, it was time to add the sleeves. So what I did was I just kind of pinned the sleeve following the curve of the jacket, the armhole, and just pinned this all the way around so that I could then take a seam. For all of this, you may notice that I do have some raw edges. We will be going back through using some bias tape to clean all of that up. But once it was pinned, I just went ahead and took a seam all the way around. So here's what one half of my jacket looks like. So you can see that we have the sleeve on there. It looks really nice. It fits really well with the way that the jacket is formed too. So I'm very excited about it. And now it is just time to repeat all of those steps on the second side. So I pinned up my sleeve. Once I did that, I went ahead and took a seam, and then I matched the seam to the curve of the jacket for what the armhole was, and then I just sewed it up as well. So now that the sleeve is attached, it's looking really nice. You can see we have both those sleeves, we have our shoulder seams, and now what it's really starting to focus on is kind of how we're going to tie this all together. We're going to be adding a collar to it. I'm also going to be adding buttons down the front, and then we will have to focus on like the hem as well as finishing off all of those raw edges. So the edges, what we're going to be doing is adding some bias tape using a really fun cotton. We'll get to that later. The hem will just be a rolled hem at the bottom. So now it is time to prepare the jacket for the collar at the top. And the way that I'm going to do this is actually folding in the jacket. So along these edges, I'm going to do a rolled hem as I'm not adding a lining. And then this will allow us to be able to attach the collar, and you will not see any of the raw edges on like the front. So first I took my collar portion and just folded it so that the wrong sides were actually together. And then I just pinned this all up. Next, I took my jacket and I began the process of folding both of those edges in on themselves. And then what I did was I just took a seam directly to hold the collar as well as to begin the process of that rolled hem. Next, I rolled all of this on top of each other again. So for those two front portions of the jacket, really making it so that you wouldn't see any of those raw edges and making it be nice and clean. So this was a great way you can do a rolled hem, and also any of that extra fabric I just kind of cut off to help reduce the bulk that would come up from folding this over twice on itself, since it's a heavy material. And then it was time to just take the seam for both sides. Now that we have all of this done, we can see that we have those nice edges, no longer have any of those raw edges on either side. It will be ready for the buttons, but first we need to add the collar. So since I already did begin the process of adding the collar and we do have those raw edges, what we're going to do is basically pin this together with right sides together to the collar portion onto the top part of the jacket. You'll see that I left a little extra on either side, and what I'm doing is going to be folding this in on itself so that I'm reducing the raw edge that would come from that collar portion as well, and just making it so that I'm just going to take one continuous seam from one edge of the collar all the way around the collar and then all the way to the other edge of the collar. So this way it's just all done in one part. So this is what my jacket looks like so far. You can see everything is starting to come together. We do still have some of those raw edges, but we will be dealing with them later. That's where the bias tape's going to be going, but the collar is on, we have the sleeves, and we have the front prepared for where the buttons are going to go. So now it is time to start really focusing on the edges of the sleeves, which I'm also going to be doing a rolled hem for, as well as worrying about the actual hem of the jacket itself. So the first step though is to look to see how this fits. So what I did was I ended up trying it on, and I made the sleeves way too large, as you can tell, so I am gonna have to hem these quite a bit. I'm still deciding how I want to do that, but overall I really like the fit of it. I like how kind of it's on the bigger side, but it still feels nice, and then the collar looks good with it too. So to get the correct sizing on the sleeve, what I did was I just rolled it up to where I wanted, so I see how much I have, and then I repeated this for the second side of my sleeve, and I'm just gonna figure out, exactly, do I want to fold this in on itself? How do I want to take that rolled hem? And just that's how I'm going to finish them both off, is they're going to be rolled hems based off of that measurement for what I need to remove. So once I had that in place, what I did was I just kind of pinned it up using my quilting clips, and then I'm going to take a seam all the way around and cut off that extra material. So once I had that done, I folded this all over on itself again with that measurement for exactly how I wanted it to fit, used my quilting clips, and then took the final seam so that I would have that correct hem done for both of the sleeves, and so that it would fit proportionally and correctly for how I want. Now it was time to work on the hem for all the way around the coat, so I basically did the exact same process of folding it up since I did like where it was hitting. I added the quilting clips so that I knew where to go, and then I just took a seam all the way around, following that same process of the rolled hem method. So here's what my hem looks like. You can tell there are no more raw edges. It looks really nice on the bottom. The sleeves also look really nice. And then of course we have down the front that those look nice as well. Now it's time to worry about the rest of our raw edges, which are actually a lot. Now if you had a serger, you could have used that. I at the time did not have one yet. So what I'm going to do is kind of make my own bias tape. So for this, I had a lot of different spots where I needed to trim this up. And then how I did this was I made this bias tape using this really fun cotton material I had. And once I made it, I just kind of wrapped it all the way around so that it would cover all of those raw edges, and then you wouldn't be able to see them. This way it's a lot easier to wash, and I don't have to worry about anything coming unraveled. This was very similar to how I've done bias tape in the past for quilts. You could do it for lots of different things. I'll include some links at the top in case you're interested in how you can make your own. It's very simple to do though. There's also machines that you can buy that will make the bias tape for you, depending on whatever fabric you want. Once I had it all pinned up, I took a seam at the base of the bias tape. This way you would remove as much of the raw edge as possible and just sew that all up so that it would end up looking really nice. So you can see here, this is kind of what the final look turns out. It looks really nice. You get that kind of little pop of color, but you also do not have any raw edges, and then you can't see anything on the other side of the fabric on the right side either. So it just allows you a really clean and smooth finish. And then I just continued this all the way for my jacket. Once I had that done, this is what the jacket looks like. It's kind of fun looking at it because this is technically the inside of it. So I think you could probably wear it like this if you wanted to for something different. But now what it's time to focus on is the buttons. So I turned my jacket right side out, and what I noticed was, like, on the bias tape, there's this cute little fairy detail. I love this fabric so much. But anyways, it's time to focus on the buttons. So I got 8 of these probably 1-inch size buttons, and I'm just going to put them all the way down my jacket. The way that I made sure that I had them even was I spaced them out on a measuring tape as the length for where they would be going, and then that's how I got the exact measurement to go between them, as it wasn't going to be exactly 2 inches or 1 inch, but I could also make sure that I was doing correctly the size of the buttonhole. So buttonholes are very easy to do. You just need to make sure though that you do have the correct spacing. So once I got one done, I measured that so that I could make sure that it would be the exact same measurements for the rest of my buttons, as I wanted to be sure that I didn't have any weird gaps or just spots that you could tell that the buttons weren't measured correctly. I wanted this to be as measured correctly as I possibly could. So I really spent a lot of time making sure that everything was lining up and everything looked nicely for the buttons. Once I had them all lined up and with the correct spacing between, it turned out I only needed 7 buttons. I thought about adding a button to the collar, but I decided against that, and then I just really started going with the rest of the buttonholes. So here's what they look like. You can tell they look really nice, but for the buttonholes I did use a seam ripper to open them up. This was very scary for me as I was afraid I was going to kind of damage all the buttonholes that I just made, but I just took my time and really went through it carefully and opened all of the buttonholes up. So now with that complete, it was time to actually start adding the buttons. So this was pretty easy to do. The way that I did this was I kind of put my button through the buttonhole first, and then I just lightly stitched it in place. And then once I had it kind of in the correct spot, I went back through and did the full stitching. So here's what the completed jacket looks like. I love the buttons. I love the little pop of color at the collar. Everything turned out really well. I think going with the navy blue buttons, while it wasn't necessarily my first choice, I think it turned out a lot better than originally the tan buttons that I was thinking about. The buttonholes work perfectly though, and it is now time to take it outside. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.